Hello, everybody. It's Adrian Plass here.
Yes, and Bridget. Hello.
And I can't remember what the season is. What is it? Oh, Christmas. That's right.
Oh, yes.
And this is number 236 in Sounding the Shadow. And we were working out how many Christmases it's been.
What, since we began? And we've realised it's 4 Christmases since we began to do these recordings, which is crazy, really. I don't know about what you feel about this Christmas, but it feels particularly potent, maybe. There is a need for hope. There is a need for something special. There's a sense of, I don't know, maybe downness a little bit. People seem to be struggling a bit to make it work, to make it something special. Is that how you feel?
Yeah, I suppose it is. I mean, I've always found the abundance of Christmassy stuff a little overpowering by the time we get here. But I do remember, and I've been remembering this year as a child, deliberately making myself remember the magic of it, and the magic of hearing the carols, especially the Holly and the Ivy for some strange reason, and the magic of Christmas presents in the morning, and I do just the feeling that it was exciting. I don't know. And because of all the kind of Christian stuff, that all changes or tries to change. If you're not careful, remove the magic. I think it's a very good.
I don't know what you mean.
Well, it becomes something you look at instead of something you're in, and so it's a very good thing to just bring that word magic forward. Because, you know, in churches, people always say, oh, no, be very careful, you don't talk about magic. I mean, surely we've grown up past that. There is something magic about the whole Christmas thing in its depth and its profundity.
I think when you hear a choir boy singing Once in Royal David's City, the exquisiteness of that voice surely was created. Surely there was a God behind the creation of beauty in all ways, and these things I think do move us. But I suppose I was thinking, Adrian, that in a way, you know, that thing, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I mean, I think that's true of Christmases, really, for people. They remember the best and they remember the worst, and there have been times when, and there will be for people listening to this, maybe this Christmas might fit into one of those categories.
Well, we know somebody, don't we, from the past who, when Christmas loomed, to use her word, would simply retreat as far into a dark place as she could get and wait for it to end.
Yeah, well, that's true too. But I think we've all got memories. I mean, the year, Adrian, let me think. Well, one really special one was, we've been doing this, as I say, for 4 years, and it was in 2019, you had a brain bleed. I can't believe it was that long ago.
Was it really? Oh, yeah, probably.
Well, I think it was, because at the end of that year, there was something so precious about knowing that you were going to enjoy Christmas that added to it. And I met somebody today in the cafe where I volunteer, our church cafe, who has been, we've been sort of alongside him through a long haul of chemotherapy, and he was saying, I'm going to see this Christmas, and there's a potency there that's the good news. But then I also remember the Christmas just after your mum died, which was the bleakest of Christmases, because she'd always been there. So it's as though there is a potency in the air of memory.
I do remember the change after my operation and coming back home, and we went away for Christmas, didn't we, the whole family, and I do remember the feeling of freedom, that I had been too ill to be taking any very very energetic lead in anything. And I was waking in the morning. But it was good. Waking in the morning, I was in the middle of reading a book, and I was waking each morning with a feeling of great peace and reading another bit of my book. and then getting dressed at half a mile an hour.
No expectation on you.
That's
at
right.
all.
No, and I really, really enjoyed that. So I do remember that very well.
Yeah, and because of the crises in our families' lives, I think everybody were maybe more loving, maybe more openly loving, maybe saying things that they wouldn't have said. And I think that applies to the best and worst of times as well. There's no doubt that death and birth and all the rest of it all tangle together when it comes to these important times. And I was thinking, Adrian, about the fact that I know Christmas doesn't apply to a huge section of the world, but there's a huge section of the world for whom this is the one thing that they have in common. It's Christmas. There'll be totally different traditions, totally different situations, totally different families, totally different insides thinking about it. But for a huge number of people, it is one thing they have strangely in common, whether they have a faith or not.
Do you think people think much about it, those who don't have faith? Do you think that, presumably some people are just glad it's a holiday time and they like getting together?
Yes, of course. Yeah. And I think a lot of people from a different faith would say it's a holiday season. It's a time to get together for families to celebrate, getting together, rather like Thanksgiving is in America, the big one. Yeah. Christmas is in this country, the big one. Different countries celebrate more on Christmas Eve than on Christmas Day and so on. But there's something that separates this day from the rest of the year, isn't there?
It's interesting, really. People talk about memories. One of my most vivid memories and most profound memories was a day when I was sitting by a window and a breeze came through the window and brushed around the back of my neck. And I can't remember what year it was or what I was doing, but I remember the feeling of ridiculous joy at the fact that a breeze had come to find me through the window. Why that would be, I don't know. I think as a believer, and I know some people will think, oh God, here we go again. As a believer,
hopefully some of the people listening to us won't mind too much, Adrian.
I know.
Come on.
But as a believer, I think I go diving around for a different kind of significance in it, because although, and we'll get back to this in a minute, but although for many it's one day in the year, including some believers, it's actually a sign of something much bigger and much
smaller.
Yeah, I know, that's right. I did write a limerick about it, which I will read to you, although I'm afraid I'm not quite sure what it means, but I think I know what it means. It's quite simple. It's just called Christmas Day. 200 decades since freedom began. Numberless cries of I could and I can. Present and past. The gifts that will last. 2,000 birthdays for one risen man.
I haven't heard you read this, Adrian, or even seen it.
No.
So what did you mean when you said about not quite understanding it? What was the thing?
Well, I wrote it because I had a feeling about something, and sometimes when you write things, I mean, they can end up very bad or not bad or whatever, but you try to write into the feeling to understand what you're thinking. And I think it was that I was thinking Jesus is 2,000 years old as a risen man. He comes back from the dead, appears in the garden, and his body is alive again. And so he's had 2,000 birthdays since then, give or take a few.
Well, plus the 30 that he had before.
Plus the 30 he had before that. So,
can you read it again? Because I think anybody listening to it will probably want to just hear it again.
I'll read it again,
yeah.
200 decades since freedom began. Numberless cries of I could and I can. Present and past, the gifts that will last. 2,000 birthdays for one risen man. And I suppose in the end, what my Harper thought was that for him, for that risen person, Jesus, every time there is a growth of hope and optimism and change in someone's life because he came, it's another gift and a wonderful gift. So he's got millions of gifts from that, what he did on that day of arriving. So I don't know, something about that, I think, that it's not it is a day, but it's also
it's an extraordinary thought, Adrian. 2,000 birthdays.
Yes, I know.
Quite
what would you like for
really.
Your 2000th birthday?
Yeah. Well, I think Jesus would have enjoyed today at this cafe where, as I say, I volunteer on a Thursday, and one of the junior schools came to sing. There is nothing more delightful than children singing their little hearts out, and maybe not understanding everything that they're singing about. There were some really beautiful carols, some of which I'd never heard before, and maybe they didn't all understand all of it, but catching something special, something connected with Jesus, something more than, as I keep saying about this more than thing. But I think we have to look for it. We have to never settle. I liked your line, I could and I can, not settling for mediocrity, not settling for dismalness, really, but looking for these beautiful things in children's attitude to Christmas. It's very hard because, sitting with our grandson who's not yet 4, and there were some adverts for toys on, and he said, I quite like that, and then he said, I quite like that, and then he saw a Barbie, he said, I quite like that, and then he saw something else, I quite like that. I mean, it's not fair. It's not fair. But at the same time, there's an openness to something, as you said, magical. So that's what I hope, that somehow in the middle of everything, people who believe will catch something more, will have a moment of quiet.
It's a much wider principle even than that, isn't it? That wherever you look, even in places where it looks as though perhaps those who are fed up with Christmas and all the palaver, there is something there. And I was talking to somebody, one of our sons this week, about Oscar Wilde's letter to Bosie, which De Profundis, which he's not exactly a well-known evangelical.
No, and his relationship doesn't exactly fit with the standard expectation.
Well, I don't know, but anyway, I found something in that letter that I found really informed my thinking about things ever since, and that's his statement that he thinks that the thing that made Jesus different was his imagination. So when someone rushed up and said, "My child is sick, what will you do?" and then they came and said, "Now she's dead," he saw a live child and went to see the live child. He didn't go to see the dead child. He went to see, for that moment when he would say, what was it, Talitha Kum, and the child would wake up. And I've really benefited from that in a big way. But I'm not a naturally optimistic person, but looking for good in things where you perhaps didn't think you might.
Well, I know we've talked about it before, but that's one of the precious gifts that children have, is wonderful imagination that kind of can get stifled later on. But, you said, it's Oscar Wilde and all the rest of it, but if we don't give ourselves a chance to learn from people who may think very, very differently from us, often they have other gifts. I mean, Oscar Wilde, a wonderful storyteller. We were listening to a program about Alan Bennett, which might be somebody that people not from the UK, they might not know him, but it's worth just looking him up. Yes, I think they probably would. But one thing again that struck you, can you remember what it was? You said about The Secret Garden.
Well, I just think he's wonderful anyway, because he is an original thinker and a blatantly honest person.
Yeah.
Who's allowed his honesty to be part of his art. And I love him, I love it. But one thing he did say, and I'm probably going to slightly misquote him, he said, he's writing a diary, I think, he's 90 now, isn't he?
Yeah, he was reading bits from the diary he's written for years. He's kept a journal,
And he said the crowd has got into the secret garden and they've littered it.
But you see, I mean, you were saying that it made you think of lots of lovely places that become, I mean, the Lake District, if you like, the whole of the Lake District, that was beautiful before it was discovered by the Romantic poets and is now covered with people every summer, you know. But then I was thinking about Christmas, the secret garden. How local was the birth of Jesus? How ludicrously local it was to a small area of the world. A secret garden, you know, a baby born, and how one by one people came to discover him, and how now it's trampled all over, really, by all sorts of things.
Well, it's claimed and used to make do horrible things to people, all sorts of terrible results. But the idea that things are not allowed to be simply what they are anymore, but that they've become things you look at, and then you go away again, and you have refreshments, and I mean, I'm talking metaphorically about all of this,
and we're talking about all of us, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, you know, everybody now, probably including us, takes a selfie in front of something that's beautiful, because you want to show that you were there in some way, but also because photos are more interesting with somebody in them than just of the landscape. But photographs, we want to catch something that was there before us, like the naming of animals that were there before they were given names. You know.
There's a comment which you heard from me before, where one of the great poets, talking about a rather lesser poet, said he keeps his tears in like dirty postcards in a drawer, and that's one of the things, one of the areas in which it goes wrong, that you have a way of making yourself feel something, and actually it's based on nothing. Okay. It's just a desire to feel it, like you take a drink of orange squash or something, and then put the bottle down again, and it's not the thing. It's something that isn't actually with. I don't know. I'm beginning to talk nonsense at this point, but
we can carry on talking nonsense.
No. I'm used to it. People are used to me talking nonsense, but I think the whole thing about Jesus is so much in me, so much a part of me, that I do always come back to asking, what can this possibly mean? You know, this is just a strange thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have something to read to people,
well, we do, and we may have even read it to you before. As we say, this is our 4th Christmas of doing things. It's a poem you wrote a long time ago, isn't it? And I think because we've touched on situations in the developing world where children are starving, we've been in contact with people whose lives were so abusive as children that they've lost themselves. We've met clergy who once were full of vigour and faith and end up dried up and lost, and I think you tried to catch a lot of it with the possibility and the truth that Jesus can be born again in all these situations.
I'm never quite sure we've ever got it quite right with this, but we'll read it to people anyway. It's just called "And Jesus Will Be Born." On Christmas Day, the world will turn once more towards its end, but Jesus will be born. A woman who has tried once more in vain to recreate the morning will find her spirit crushed at last by failures and defeats. Her grief will trail like tattered ribbons through apocalyptic streets, and Jesus will be born.
A little child who cannot waste his tiny reservoir of moisture on a thing as purely pointless as a tear, will puzzle at the burning skies, blank and empty as his mother's eyes, and wish beyond the point of fear that darkness would descend, and Jesus will be born.
And in some cold, sad cell, a man will dream of blessed ordinariness, a walk, a meal, a smile, a book, the chance to feel a trusting hand in his, small and soft and folded like a flower in the night, devastating innocence that promises redemption and has never lied, and will not save him from the morning and the hour when heavy boots come marching down the corridor outside, and Jesus will be born.
At the corner of the street, the image of the living God will hug herself against the cold and smoke a friendly cigarette and be prepared to greet success with weary resignation, feebly lit by one of yesterday's recycled smiles, and struggle to forget what she was told when someone was in charge and choices could be made and there was hope. And Jesus will be born.
And in a hollow church, a hollow priest, dry and dusty as some jewelled chalice locked away for safety and for ever, will sit and sigh and gather oddments, scraps of truth, remnants of an old forgotten dream, ideas and words like autumn leaves made brittle by a year of death and by the scorching summer sun, and feel once more so glad and oh so very, very sad that those who delicately brush his sprinkled fragments from their Sunday best will never hear the distant panic-stricken scream. And Jesus will be born.
Yes, Jesus will be born. Though the night enfolds like a black shroud and the liar's lies drive us from our peace and take us from our beds and bring us to our knees on the cold stone tiles of the kitchen floor, Jesus will be born.
Yeah, though the skies crack and the heavens sway and the heat dies in the earth's core and the last stitch in the last ditch appears, when all is lost,
a child's hand will reach out from the manger. A wounded hand will catch our tears, for Jesus will be born forevermore on Christmas Day.
So there we are. It's nearly Christmas.
It is nearly Christmas, and we want to wish you, it sounds so trite after that poem, but a happy Christmas, a good Christmas. And a chance may be that you can find a crack in all the busyness, a space where Jesus can reach out his hand from the manger, a wounded hand catching tears, and Jesus will be born forevermore on Christmas Day for all of you, for all of us. God bless you.
Yeah, and I hope we get some big fat gifts as well.